Hello, friends. Welcome back. We didn't get to see each other last Wednesday because it was Canada Day, and I hope you all enjoyed Canada Day with your friends and family. Danny Richard here again for another session of Wednesday webinars. Today's topic, we'll be looking at advocacy parts. What does that mean for ACFO? Because this is one of the more unknown things that our members know that we do. And our guest today is Madeline Rodriguez. Maddie, hello.
Hi, Danny.
So Maddie's been with ACFO since 2014. She's our comms and research officer. We'll get a little bit more into that later on. But first, I want to give you guys an update on COVID-19, as we always do. I think, as I mentioned the previous Wednesday webinar 2 weeks ago, one of the things that was different and new is that there are certain departments now that are offering credits, so equipment credits for the non-electrical equipment. So not your monitors, not your printers, but really if you want a chair or an office, something that you can go and buy on your own that the department would credit back to you. So the biggest leader on this is PSPC as a department, not as a service provider to other departments, but on their own. They're offering all their employees a $500 credit. This has to be approved by the manager, obviously. And like I said, the big distinction here is for any equipment that is non-electrical. So you can't just go and buy out in anything. So basically you buy it off your credit card and you get refunded by the department. Now, not all departments are doing this right now, but the reason we're telling you this is that so you are aware that certain departments are offering it. So you might want to ask your manager, hey, I heard PSPC is doing this, so that you can actually get leverage and say maybe our department could look into it. If you want more information on this, we can actually send you PSPC's policy on how it works for the credit for the $500. It's something that we're happy to see PSPC's taking the lead on, because once a big department takes the lead on something like this, it makes it easier for smaller departments to just tag along for the show. Another thing that ACFO is looking into is the notion of your province of work. So as you can imagine, for someone who works in Gatineau or Ottawa, your taxation is always dependent on where your work is located. So if you live in Ottawa, but you work in Gatineau, well, you're going to be tax deducted at the Gatineau province, Quebec province. You'll get that back at the end of the year, obviously, but still throughout the year, you have to wait till you make your taxes. But now if you're actually working from Ottawa the whole year, or it doesn't matter what province it is, if you're working in the same province that you live, you should just be deducted at the source from that. So CRA has said, we're not going to change our taxation rules because this is a one-off, but we've asked OCRO, the lead of HR for all the departments, can they look into this with CRA, because it's really not fair if you're living in a different province and you work in a different province. Normally we can see why, but now everything's happening in the same province. As a reminder, for COVID-19, you should not be going back to work unless this makes sense to you. And the reason I say this is because there are certain tasks out there that might require you to be physically in the office, but you should know this, right? You'll know this. But if you are asked to come back to work and you feel that it doesn't make really any sense because you can actually accomplish your duties from home, then definitely contact us, because everyone's security and safety is our top priority. And if you think it doesn't make any sense for you to go back to work, please contact us. I'm not saying don't work at all. I'm just saying you might not need to physically go back into the office. So that's update on COVID-19. We'll take your questions later. As a reminder, if you have questions for Maddie or myself, you can reach us on slido.com. Slido.com is our interactive interface that we use to actually get your questions. So slido.com, you put in the code, which is ACFO-ACAF, ACFO-ACAF, as you can see on your screen right now, and then we'll take all your questions. Okay, so let's talk about today's topic. So advocacy. So at ACFO, there's a lot of things we do for our members, right? If you go on our website, everything is there. But if you're like me, you're not going to spend an hour on our website because you're a busy man, right? I mean, I do because I'm the president, so of course I like to spend time on our website. But as a member from a department, you've got other things to do. So we've already talked about a lot of the things we do. So one of the primary things we do is we negotiate the collective agreement, right? That's one of the key things that members know that we do. They know that the union negotiates a collective agreement. We also represent our members when they're facing workplace issues, right? So we negotiate terms, and then we want to make sure those terms are respected by the employer. So that's the second thing, is workplace issue. The third one is kind of unique to ACFO, which we talked about, is we provide professional development. We know that our members' career advancement is important to them. We want to make sure that we give them the tools to succeed. And the fourth category that we do is advocacy. And this is really the one that I find members aren't necessarily aware, and rightfully so, because they don't see the tangible results right away. This is us doing research and lobbying and getting information so that we can help our members down the road. So we figured it'd be good to bring in Maddie here so she can really walk us through some of our initiatives. For example, what are we doing on artificial intelligence, whistleblower protection, and staffing and surveys? So I'm gonna throw it over to Maddie because we're gonna start with the artificial intelligence. What is ACFO doing on artificial intelligence? So Maddie, over to you.
Okay, thanks, Danny. So let's talk about artificial intelligence. So we at ACFO know that the increasing use of artificial intelligence and other workplace technologies are going to have an impact on the workforce and will affect ACFO members specifically. So we're sort of working to understand the effects that AI will have, both in terms of opportunities it can present and also priority areas for advocacy to protect your positions. Essentially, we're just trying to wrap our heads around what your workplace will look like in 15 years. But we also know that this is an issue that affects professional workers at all levels of government, which is why we're conducting sort of the first stage of this research through PUNC, that's PUNC. PUNC, for those of you who don't know, is the Professional Unions Network of Canada, which is a coalition of unions representing professional knowledge workers in the federal and provincial public services. ACFO is a founding member of PUNC, and we're part of the coalition's steering committee. So the first stage of this research project we are doing through PUNC consists of an anonymous survey of ACFO members and members of the AFS Audit, Financial and Scientific Group of PIPS, the Professional Institute of Public Service of Canada. And so the reason that these two groups were selected as sort of the initial test groups for the survey is because both ACFO and PIPS were already aware that this is something our members are encountering. They're being affected by important changes in these sort of work-related software technology. So we already kind of had this on our radar. So we'll be doing a survey. You should be receiving it in this week. The survey was drafted by PIPS, and it will be analyzed confidentially by PIPS, but the results will be shared with ACFO, and we, of course, will be sharing it with you. Like I said, an email sort of explaining the purpose of the survey will be sent to you later this week, including a link for you to take the survey. If you can, I really encourage you to take it. It should only take about 5 minutes to complete, and it will be really helpful to us both in terms of this research project and also just our own advocacy within departments. Like I said, it's anonymous. It asks you to identify your classification and level and your department, and that's it. So that's sort of that's the beginning of this research project. I will say that in the beginning of this year, in the beginning of 2020, which feels like a very long time ago, ACFO had begun plans to convene an AI roundtable, which would have brought together AI and digital skills experts with some select ACFO members to sort of identify probable areas of automation, discuss the future of controllership, and kind of generate strategies for how you can harness your skills and continue to add value to the public service. So we really conceived of this as like an in-person conference, one-day conference, and that out of that, the hope was that we would have a sort of policy paper, a position paper. Obviously, we've had to press pause on that initiative for the time being because of COVID-19, but we are still thinking about how we might be able to move forward with it as the situation with COVID-19 develops. So you can kind of stay tuned for that. Right now, we're focusing a lot on this survey research, but yeah, stay tuned for that in the future.
Thanks, Maddie. AI is something, if you've attended the spring tune-up for the past 3 or 4 years, we've always had a speaker on technology and artificial intelligence, because as part of our job at ACFO, we're looking out for our members' best interests. And for us, AI, you can view it through a lens of it's a risk or it's an opportunity. And I truly believe for us, it's an opportunity. And I want to show you why it's something serious. Joe, if you could pull up the website there, there's a website that's called "Will Robots Take Over My Job?" Right? So it's based on research back from 2013. So if you type in to this field, you put your profession. So Joe's typing accountants and auditors right there, right? So you press on it. You can any profession you want. You type on it, and it says 94%. What does that mean? Well, if you scroll down, it says, hey, you're doomed, basically, right? What are they saying here? They're saying your job is 94% likely to get automated. And when you think about this, it makes sense. What's accounting? Debits and credit. Those are all rules. They're also repeatable tasks. They're rules that an AI could do. Look at taxation, right? When you go back 20 years, we had to fill out our tax forms by hand. You get a software now, you can do this automatically. Look at Simply Accounting. Well, Sage now, but it's really a task that is automatable. And the reason I want to show you that one, I mean, this is back in 2013. It's growing exponentially. So do I believe our jobs will be automated? Yes, I do. But does that mean you're going to lose your job? No, only specific tasks of your job will be automated. The ones that are the boring, monotonous ones, the data entry, the reconciliation, anything that is repeatable and routine, that will get automated. But that doesn't mean there's no risk for you. I've always said this, that you need to add value, right? And the best way to add value is to ask your bosses, okay, what's on your plate right now that I can help you out with? And now if that's reconciliation, that's great. You can help with that because you have a skill set to do this. But many of the jobs that are automated will be those tasks. So you have to work on your soft skills. That's why on the professional development side, we always focus on those soft skills. It's so key for us, friends, because a lot of our tasks will get automated. I'm telling you, as the union leader, I'm not against it. I want to get rid of that boring stuff on the stuff that is not really showing our truest value. You need to build relationships, build rapport, think outside the box, see the trends, do your analysis. These are the things that the robots, that the AI can't do right now. Maybe in 20 years they can, but for the time being, we got to move away from the data operational stuff. This is really something that if you're doing right now, you need to think and say, okay, how is my job going to be impacted by AI? You've got to see this as an opportunity because certain tasks will be automated. Now we can be against it. We can put our head in the sand or fight it, but I guarantee you it's going to happen. It's like fighting Excel 20 years ago. Everyone's using Excel now, right? Because it makes sense. It saves us so much more time. So we want you guys to be aware of it and be proactive. Look at the tasks that you do. Which ones could have potential to be impacted by AI? No one knows your job better than yourself. So why not have a head start and say, you know what? Looking at my job, I can see how this 20 to 30% might get automated. So what would you do if I freed up 30% of your time? How could you add even more value? What skill set do you need 5 to 10 years from now that you should start working on today so that when it does happen, you're ready? So that when your manager comes and sees you and says, you know what? We're going to automate a couple of tasks that you're doing. You don't resist it. You say, I'm glad you're here. I think not only can we automate these tasks, but I think we can automate these as well. And here's how we can do it. And here's what I'd like to do with my time. See, now you're part of the solution. You're not part of the problem. And I'll tell you, anyone that's against it, they're going to contact the union and say, hey, they're taking away some of my jobs and my task, and I'm concerned for my job. So see this as an opportunity. As financial professionals, you've shown you can learn and adapt. Let's start doing that now and not wait till it's last minute. So thank you, Maddie, for that one. The other thing we're working on is whistleblower protection. And Maddie, what's your thoughts on that as the research projects there?
Yeah, so for the whistleblower protection initiative, some of you may remember that in 2017, ACFO conducted an extensive research project on whistleblower protection in the public service, and specifically on improvements to the Public Servants Disclosure Protection Act. And we submitted our findings to the House Committee on Government Operations and Estimates as part of their review of the Act. And so that review consulted with a variety of stakeholders, and the end result of that was the committee's own report with their own recommendations, and many of those recommendations were ones that ACFO had also made. So we largely supported the committee's report. We lobbied the government to implement those recommendations, specifically highlighting the reversal of onus on allegations of reprisal against whistleblowers, and the expansion of the Public Sector Integrity Commissioner's authority. So that would include public or private sector contractors and those who have retired from the positions that they are accused of abusing. And we also, those were included in the committee's report as well as ours. One of the recommendations that we lobbied for that wasn't included in the committee's report, but that we think is really important, is implementing staffing priority and income protection for whistleblowers. We strongly support that, and we're going to continue to lobby the government to get these measures sort of fully implemented. We're also working with the CLC, the Canadian Labour Congress, in drafting their own whistleblower protection position paper. And we know from the last State of the Community survey, so not the one that just closed, but the 2018 and 2019 one, that your level of comfort with disclosing wrongdoing actually decreased in 2018 to 2019 as compared to the 2017 one. So we're going to be keeping our eye on how that number changes in the most recent survey, the 2019 to 2020. So this is still, a very important issue for ACFO, and ensuring that you can safely disclose wrongdoing without fear of reprisal. It's been a priority for us for a long time, and I think we believe that it's especially important now because the need to maintain trust in public institutions is very high right now, and so are the demands on public funds. They're greater than ever, so that is still something that we're going to be focusing on going forward.
Thanks, Maddie. Whistleblower is an interesting one because it ties in very closely to fear of reprisal. So our members, because of the nature of their work, often see behind the curtain. What I mean by that is when you see the numbers, you have a very good idea of what's going on. It's something that inevitably you might see something in your career that doesn't pass the smell test. You might not necessarily fraud, but something you find suspicious based on really the task that you're doing. But let's go beyond that. As an employee, sometimes you might feel like you're being harassed or threatened or intimidated, and you think it's a team effort, and you don't feel comfortable blowing the whistle, saying, you know what, I think these people are hiring the people because it's nepotism. They know them, and we'll talk about staffing later. But the key thing here is we want to protect our members when they're trying to do the right thing. You should never be penalized for that. The majority of our members are accountants, and as an accountant, you have a code of conduct, code of ethics. And one of this is when you see something that's wrong, you have an obligation to speak up. But sometimes at ACFO, some members will reach out to us and say, well, I don't know if it's wrong because I don't have the proof, but this is suspicious behavior. I'll give you an example here. So when in 2012 or 13, there was DRAP, and then the policy came out that said, well, if you're attending an event, if it's a training event, you can go. If it's a conference, that's different. So basically, the coding of a transaction impacted. Is it a conference or is it a training session? Because there was a cap on the conferences. So one of our members reached out to us and said, hey, I've just been given a direction here to code everything to training because there's no cap on training. But some of these transactions are full-blown conference. I've made my recommendation. I've said this should be a conference, and they said, no, code it to training instead. So the member had to decide, what do I do here? Do I go over my boss's head? Because I know this is wrong. I'm not saying it's fraud, but maybe my boss is not understanding what's going on. Should I go over their head to do the right thing? The challenge with that is even if you're doing the right thing, sometimes it will work against you because what if your boss's boss then says, no, code it to training still, to train it still. So you're still not validated, and now people are starting to work against you when at the core, all you were trying to do is the right thing. Now, I'm using a very basic examples here, but we've seen cases of this where it can escalate pretty quickly, where members have seen fraud, they blew the whistle, and they lost their job. The member didn't do anything wrong, they escalated, and they were fired. Now, we can't prove they were fired because this can go by many ways, right? So you shouldn't have to be put in a position where you have to decide between your livelihood of putting food on the table versus doing the right thing. If you see a fraud for $2, say you have a taxi chit with no receipt and you see a trend, would you risk your career over this? I would say right now, don't do it. I mean, send your recommendation and say, you know what, I believe someone should look into this because I'm seeing suspicious activities. But I would push all the way because my career is at stake. And I'm saying this as a union leader. Don't get me wrong. Am I saying should you raise something? Yeah, bring the attention. But I wouldn't go full blown and raise the attention to investigate myself, because A, it's not my job, and B, I don't want to put my career. So really, what we're trying to do with whistleblower protection is that when you raise an issue, you're doing it out of good governance and good faith, and the employer shouldn't have the ability to reprise against you. So one of the things we've asked for was turn over the onus. Right? So right now, if you want to prove someone did fraud, you have to get the evidence. What we want is get the reverse onus, so that when you are accused of doing something wrong, prove to me you didn't fraud, right? If I say, hey, I think you're hiring all your brothers and sisters, and based on the evidence I have, you kind of are, well, prove to me they aren't, right? So there's a lot of things at play here, but we want to make sure we're protecting our members, because due to the nature of their tasks, they see a lot of things and they have to be protected. It's kind of a segue to our next topic that we're doing here, which is staffing. So Maddie, back over to you for some of the comments on staffing actions that we're taking.
Yeah, and actually I'm going to talk about staffing and outsourcing, because there's sort of an overlap in our advocacy efforts on that and some of our research efforts. So I'm going to talk about both of them together and then sort of separate them out. So yeah, we do, research on staffing and advocacy on research on staffing and on outsourcing. So in last year's survey, again, the 2018 to 2019 one, we added a new question that was, the purpose of it was to gauge your perception of the fairness of the staffing process, the use of non-advertised competitions in your department, and the use of consulting or contracting out in your department. And so, in the results of that survey, respondents gave their department's staffing process an average fairness rating of 3.06 on a scale of 1 to 5. So just a little bit over the middle there, additionally, 43% of respondents said that they believed that the number of non-advertised competitions have increased. So that was very interesting to us, and it made it clear that that should be a priority for us. Now, the 2019 to 2020 survey also included this question, so we're going to be able to actually track that over the course of 2 years to see how perceptions have changed. But based on the results of that question from the survey, and on a lot of direct feedback that we got from members through email or phone calls saying, hey, I'm noticing, these things, these competitions in my department. The focus of this aspect of our research has been on non-advertised competitions and on the fairness of the staffing process. So what we did with that is last year we submitted ATIPs, so that's like the access to information requests, to 15 of the biggest departments to find out how many competitions were advertised versus non-advertised over the past 3 fiscal years. So like 2016 to 17, 2017 to 18, and 2018 to 2019. And I should say that we did this was sort of before ACFO represented the whole CT group. So this was specific to FI positions, now the CT FIN. And most of the departments did eventually get back to us, eventually being the operative word. And we were able to break down most of the results fairly granularly to like internal advertised, internal non-advertised, external advertised, and external non-advertised. But overall, the results were that over 50% of competitions were non-advertised. And the range over the 3 years, it was pretty consistent. It was like 53% to 56% sort of. So yeah, that was, obviously very telling to us. And sort of backed up, some of the information we were receiving. And it's also worth noting, I think, although this isn't our own, our own in-house research, the 2019 Public Service Commission staffing survey, they found that only 46% of respondents viewed staffing as fair, and only 44% viewed the staffing process is transparent. So again, you're seeing a lot of sort of backing up of the numbers that we found as well. And so we are going to, with this information, we're going to continue to advocate for the government to increase transparency and accountability on staffing. So our position is that, except in very limited circumstances, the employer should require that all staffing processes be advertised. And there will be cases when they can't. And if they can't, in the case that a staffing action cannot be advertised, they should be transparent about the rationale for excluding it. So that's our position as a sort of short-term advocacy goal. Our long-term goal would be for the staffing system to be made subject to collective bargaining, because that's the case in almost every other jurisdiction in Canada. So those are our sort of two goals, the short-term and the long-term. And that's sort of specific to staffing. And then to talk briefly about outsourcing. Like I said, staffing competitions is the focus of our research in this area, but we are continuing to advocate for the government to invest in permanent and professional public service positions and not these sort of like piecemeal contracts that we're seeing. And just to give you a sense of like how we kind of advocate for this and the arguments that we make, our position is and has always been that public servants have effectiveness and expertise that consultants just do not have. You have specific competencies, knowledge, and experience. And we know that all public servants, like Danny said, they're bound by a code of ethics. You're bound by an oath to serve the best interests of Canadians. And you do work that is accessible and accountable to the public through things like the Access to Information Act. And you're subject to and protected by the whistleblower legislation we discussed, the Public Servants Disclosure Protection Act. And none of this applies to consultants or external contractors. So that's sort of the argument that we make when we advocate no against outsourcing. This is why we need to invest in public servant positions. So that's sort of like our advocacy position on that. And just as more of a final note on both, again, to return to both outsourcing and staffing, you may have seen a couple months ago that we launched the confidential reporting tool, which applies to both outsourcing and staffing. So that is a confidential form on the ACFO website, and it allows you to give information about any staffing competitions or requests for proposals that you find questionable or of concern. And it's really brief. It just gives you a section to put the number for the request for proposal or staffing competition, and then any details you want to include. Obviously, the more details you can provide, the better. It gives us a fuller picture. And yeah, so the purpose of this tool is not necessarily to take like direct action. It may not be possible for us to take direct action on every single piece of information we receive there, but it does give us this better picture of staffing and contracting issues in departments that we wouldn't otherwise have access to, not being in those departments. Yeah, so that's something to keep in mind. If you notice anything, if there's something that you feel is of concern, you can certainly contact labor relations directly with your concerns. If you want to have someone follow up and reply directly to you, because this form is anonymous. So you can either choose the direct route and email laborrelations@ACFO-ACAF.com, or if you prefer to remain anonymous, you can submit through this confidential form. We won't be able to contact you to follow up, but it will give us more information. And everything that you submit in this tool goes directly to a labor relations advisor who's assigned with either staffing or the contracting out and consulting initiative. So that's pretty much my spiel for those two topics. I sort of combined them there. Sorry, Danny.
Great. Thanks, Matt. And thanks for the reminder on the confidential reporting tool. This is one, friends, that we need your help. ACFO is like the enforcer, right? But we need your eyes and ears for the details to tell us, leave us the breadcrumbs or give us a scent, because we cannot be in 70 departments across Canada. We have 5,000 members, and sometimes we don't have the intel that you have. But when you guys give us a hint, there's nothing I love more than asking questions, right? We never make any accusations. When we simply ask questions, the truth comes out, and it's an embarrassment for the department, the manager, whoever it might be. An example of this is for the outsourcing, right? When a couple of years ago, one of our members sent us a contract that was given to a consultant that everything in that contract could have been done by our members. It was basically a review of the forecasting process. Consultant comes in, consultant discusses with our members and say, explain to me what the process is. What would you improve the process? Where are the weaknesses? How can we streamline it? So they type all these notes, they come back with a nice report. Then they ask our members, can you review this report to make sure I didn't do any mistakes or anything I left out that you think should be left in? Our members do that. Basically, our members did the whole job. But the consultants are being paid $1,000 an hour. And as Maddie said, they're not bound by the same code of conduct that we are, because one of the reasons the government hires consultants for reasons. One of them is it's much quicker to hire a consultant than an employee. You can hire a consultant tomorrow if you want to. You put out the contract, comes out, done. Two is you can control the outcome of the documents. So if a consultant gives me a conclusion that I don't like as a manager, I can change my assumptions or my requirements and tweak that conclusion. Versus you as an employee, if the job is to improve the forecasting process, you're like, look, these are my recommendations. I'm not going to change them because you don't like them. This is me as a professional giving you my advice. Now, if you want to put something else in that report, you go ahead, but that's not my job. My here is I'm a professional. I know what I'm talking about. You can imagine how frustrating it is when a consultant comes in and stays for years, side by side with our members. They're almost employees. Meanwhile, our members are not given that interesting work. So they hire them because it's easier to hire. They can control the outcome, but also at year end, when you need to spend a lot of money, consultants are an easy way to go. You can hire 4 consultants to review your governance, right? I can tell you how many departments will review governance every year of the same report. And you couldn't be against that, right? Because who would argue being against good governance? Someone would say, oh, no, I paid $26,000 because I wanted to make sure we had good governance. But really, I'm just trying to spend my surplus, right? No, I'm just giving you exceptions here. Obviously, the majority of public servants are good people. But when I see consultants doing work our members could do, I cringe. So when you see that, let us know. You can use it, the anonymous disclosure line through the confidential reporting tool, or you can send us an email. We don't need it because we need your name. We just need those breadcrumbs so we can ask questions. So once I see a statement of work, I go to the CFO and I say, looking at the statement of work, why did you go to a consultant for this? Because the really only reason why you should be raising a consultant is because there's an expertise that we do not have inside the department, not capacity, right? You can't tell me, oh, our all employees are too busy. If they're too busy, then go for a term. A consultant charge you 10 times more. To really a consultant is for expertise. And side note, I'm going too long here, but that's fine. I've seen departments that paid the consultant's training. Why would you pay for consultant's training if you're hiring the consultant for their expertise? It doesn't make any sense to me. Now, going back to staffing, another one we need your help on. Non-advertised, Maddie talked about it. The Public Service Commission, they did say, they said 46% of respondents found they didn't trust the system, found it was unfair. I flip it around. I say the majority of employees don't trust the staffing. That's what it is. The majority of people don't trust the system, and with cause. There's no transparency. There's nothing more frustrating than you seeing someone get promoted that you feel you are equally qualified, if not more, for that job. And it's not against the other person. Maybe the other person was qualified, but the departments cannot say that everything is fair and transparent when it's not. That's why we really want departments to get that transparency up there. If you give a job to Madeline Rodriguez, great, I'm not against her, but why her? Why I didn't get a chance to compete for this? I think I'm equally qualified for the job. And when that happens time and time again, that's really annoying, especially in the regions where there's an opportunity maybe once every 2 years. So you want to make sure when there is one, it's fair to everyone. So this is something ACFO is working on because it directly impacts you in your day-to-day. But our biggest allies in this is you guys, because you see the intel. One of the members told me, Danny, why don't you just ATIP every single non-advertised? We don't have the capacity for that. We don't have the manpower. And also, I think the majority of the non-advertised are probably legitimate. No, I don't, but let's say they are. When you guys give us the intel, right? Someone told us, well, by the way, this person hired all their siblings and their relatives. Great. I'm not going to go and accuse them. I'm just going to ask, why did you hire these people through non-advertised? Because the majority of the time, the excuse they use is there was a specific knowledge or expertise that other people didn't have. And when we challenge that, we can easily see that, well, actually other people had that expertise. So for example, if we hire Madeline, we say, well, we hired her because she had 8 years experience working in financial management, and she does have that experience, but there's maybe 20 other people in the department that has that same expertise. So your reason for saying this is unique is not unique. So by you giving us the intel, we can ask the questions, and your name is not even on this anything. We just come in and ask simple questions. And eventually, if you dig deep enough, you'll see that everything comes to surface, and now we can catch people red-handed. And that's really, once you catch them red-handed, it doesn't undo the competition, but now they know we're watching them, and that has a huge deterrent effect to get things back to normal of having advertised competitions. All right, Maddie, last thing over to you for the surveys that we run. Maddie.
Yes. Yeah, so I'll just talk very briefly about the State of the Community survey. So as you probably saw, we released this year's State of the Community survey a little bit later in May. You know, for obvious reasons, it was a little bit delayed. And we closed the survey for responses approximately 2 weeks ago. So we don't have anything specific to report yet. We're still in the process of analyzing all the results and preparing all the reports that kind of break down department by department. You've probably seen them before. There's an overall report about ACFO members, and then there's the sort of individual departmental reports for departments that, have a certain number of responses. And as well as the departmental report card, which gives you a kind of summary, and you can see that's one where we have the top 3 departments in a certain area and the bottom 3 departments in certain areas. So we're still working on preparing those. We're hoping to be able to share some results with you later this summer. I was really happy we got a fair number of responses. I think slightly less than last year, but like only marginally, and that I think was very impressive considering the situation with COVID-19. We know everybody is really swamped, so I really appreciated that. Your feedback is so important for these kind of tools. And on that note, I will say that based on feedback we received from previous years, we did streamline this year's survey. So we sort of streamlined some of the questions that may have been repetitive or maybe weren't as useful. But we did also add additional questions on employment equity groups, on scheduled leave, because this is a problem in certain departments where managers schedule leave for employees. And we also, of course, added an additional section on pandemic policies. So all of that, the results are still forthcoming, so stay tuned. We may have another kind of webinar for you late in the summer to discuss those results. That's about it.
Right, thanks, Maddie. These surveys, guys, I know, look, if you're like me, you hate surveys. I am too. I get surveys from CPA, from all these organizations, and I got to plead my case to you guys because it's really, for us, one of the best ways that we have to raise your issues to the CFOs, and it's anonymous. One of the biggest concerns people have when they contact us is what happens. Will I get blackballed? Will I fear reprisal? The surveys are anonymous and they show us true trends. So when I go to your CFOs, I will tell them this is not just an anomaly. This is the majority of the people that answered. Here are the trends, and different departments have different issues. But this is one way for us to say we have trends and leverage. What are you going to do about this? And one of them, for example, was when Maddie did the ATIP for the non-advertised competitions, and GAC Global Affairs came out one of the highest. They had, I think it was 88% of competitions were non-advertised. That's data right there. That's undisputable data. That numbers didn't come from us. The numbers came from the departments. ATIP did that way. So we can go back and say, what are you going to do about that? Can you explain this? Because I could see how people feel it's unfair, unrespected, demotivated, just because they don't get the answers they're looking for from the department. So the survey shows us the trends. We can escalate to the CFO, and we can ask for an action plan to the problems you've raised. And one of the things that ACFO does is we compare departments amongst one another. And the last thing a CFO wants is to be in the bottom 3 department from our survey. So we always do, here's the top 5, here's the bottom 5. And the bottom 3 are very often the same. But still, you need to show that you're addressing this, because at the end of the day, what's the point of the survey? You've seen this with the PSES survey, where every year it comes back, I feel harassed, I feel I'm not given valid work, or whatever it is. If you don't see any difference in the following year, what's the point of filling out the survey? I can tell you, as your president, these surveys are gold to me, because now I have trends I can bring and say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. CFO, what will you do about this? So please encourage everyone to fill them out, because if we don't have sufficient number of people per department, it lowers the validity of it. And sometimes we can't even disclose the results because we can't ensure confidentiality. So make sure that you fill out and encourage everyone to do so. Maddie, before we go over to the questions, do you have anything else you wanted to mention before we go over to the questions?
No, I think that's it.
Okay, perfect. I just want to make sure I didn't skip out on anything. So again, if you want to ask questions, either myself or Maddie, Slido.com. I see we have some questions right now. So Slido.com, the code is ACFO-ACAF. Et sentez-vous à l'aise de poser vos questions en français si vous voulez, les amis. Donc, Slido.com, ACFO-ACAF. Ça me fait plaisir de prendre vos questions. Let's go with the first one. And Maddie, let me know if there's any question on there you want to take. I know there's less people online today because we didn't have a chance to advertise this one, but it'll be on video afterwards. I'll take this one. A director offered a casual FI1 to a sibling of a member in his division. The casual became a term and eventually indeterminate. How would a CFO approach this? It's a great question. Like, here's a good example where we suspect that it's all siblings. Now, what we would do is very simple. We would go up to this manager and say, hey, we realized you hired Danny Richard. There's a perception that this might have been nepotism because you two were siblings. So can you tell us what criteria was used to actually do this? Now, they might blow us off. They might say, none of your business. I don't have to report to you. I don't have to, but then I just escalate, right? It's very simple. If you're hiring one of your siblings, you've got to disclose that. You can't just hire someone and be part of the process because obviously there's a conflict of interest here. And as part of the code of conduct, the ethics of public servants, I'm not saying it's impossible to hire someone you know, but you've got to disclose that. And if that wasn't done, well, that manager probably gets slapped on the wrist. Now, that doesn't mean the person didn't deserve the job. Maybe they were competent and qualified, and they probably could have became an FI1. But to the other people, it seems like it was favoritism, and perhaps it was, but these needs to be disclosed because that person needs to remove themselves from the process to ensure that there's no perceived conflict of interest. So that's one of the ways we actually would approach this. Next one, what is ACFO doing about the broken staffing system? I mean, Maddie talked a bit about this one. Look, I personally approach Patrick Borby. Patrick Borby is the president of the Public Service Commission. Unfortunately, their mandate does not allow them to do much, for example, on non-advertised competitions, right? Why do people do non-advertised? The number one reason is because the staffing process takes too long. It takes on average 6 months. It's just too long. So what are we doing? We want to do, like Maddie said, first of all, it has to be in a collective agreement because once in the collective agreement, now we can control it. We can negotiate. The employer cannot just change it. I don't know if you know this. In 2017, they put out a new directive in staffing, which basically allowed hiring managers to decide if they want to go advertised or non-advertised. There's no preference anymore. You pick whatever you want. That's problematic because it's too easy to go non-advertised. It's just now you can just hire who you want, easy peasy, no problem at all. So we want it to be inside the collective agreement so that when they change these policies, they have to go through us. The second thing is we want to make sure that the process is fair. Now, you can't be fair all the time. I get that. Sometimes there's emergencies and you want to get there. But the fact that it takes too long is because you don't necessarily need to do a full-blown pool every time. But before you promote or hire someone within your unit, you need to make sure you've looked at your existing team. Is there anyone else that could actually qualify for this? I mentioned about lobbying. We all the unions went together on this one. All the unions agree that that's broken. The staffing system is completely broken. It takes too much time, and at the end of it, you probably don't even get the candidates that are as qualified ones as you wanted. So there are people, I'm sure you know this, I call them the serial job seekers, where they always want to go and be promoted and they understand the staffing process inside out and they'll get promoted easily. But what about you? If you don't understand how to apply for competitions, how to do the interviews, it's very difficult, right? So what we want to do is a complete revamp of the staffing process. We want to be consulted on it, but more importantly, it has to be within the collective agreement because right now it is not working. It's just not working at all. Matt, did you see anything in there you want to take for the questions?
Yeah, I'll talk about the departments scoring best on the survey because that's something that I can sort of address. So for which departments score best, it's honestly really depends on the category. So it's not often does one department just like across the board the best department to work for. A lot of times it can vary depending on what we're looking at. So some departments, let's say, have a higher score on things like professional development, language training, leave, acceptance, that kind of thing. But they might be, so they might be in the top tier for those things, but they might be in the bottom tier for things like workplace stress, effects of your workplace on mental health, that kind of stuff. So there may be a higher workload, but they do offer more professional development, or vice versa. So it is really quite hard to say like which is like the best department. It really depends on what you're looking for, which is why the departmental report card tool is so helpful, and why the breakdown in all the categories with your questions is helpful. Because some people may, if you really want to advance in your career, you may be looking for a department, you're maybe okay taking on, more of a workload, you're looking for a department that will help you move forward and give you all these development opportunities. Whereas some other people may, I want to make sure that I can protect my home life balance. And so, yeah, I know that's sort of not, I can't give you like a specific, like, here are the best departments, but it really does depend on what you're looking for. And that's why, when we come out with the results of in August, you'll be able to take a look and see, which departments are scoring higher this year and in which categories.
Thanks, Maddie. I'll tell you what, it's at the top, it is difficult to determine. I'll tell you, on average, Statistics Canada does tend to be high. Treasury Board, we had DFO last year as well. But like Maddie said, there's more ties at the end. There's clear, I'm not going to say losers, but clear as winners when it means bottom last. So consistently, Correctional Services is the department that has the most things to improve on, and that makes sense because Correctional Services, they're in the regions, right? They're working in prisons, so it's much more difficult because, first of all, they don't report to the CFO. They're outside in the region, and often they'll work in jails. So you can see how there's more things to be improved on. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't go work for Correctional Services. CSC is the fourth largest employer of FI, so there's plenty of jobs there. But you want to know what you're getting yourself into. And keep in mind as well, there's no such thing as a good or bad department. It's about the manager and the teams you're with, right? If someone were to tell me, oh, I would never go work for CSC because it's a garbage department. No, it's not the case at all. You can have a marvelous team and boss, but maybe on average it scores lower. But there's no bad, so bad that I would discourage anyone to go work there. Indigenous Services Canada is another one that scored low last year, and again, because I think that happened because they split up into two different departments, and that means that the score from last year really got shot because it's kind of anything goes right now, where there's no clear guideline at the grassroots level. So there's pros and cons, and what we can do with you guys is once the surveys are done, we post those results on our website. Yeah, I need a password, but it's available to our members. So you can go and see each department, how they scored and what their results. That's why it's so important to complete those surveys. What computer skills will be important in the future staffing for FIs? Well, FIs need to be more like data scientists and learn coding. I'll actually tie in this question with the other one, which is what course should we take now to get ready for AI? It really depends on what level you're at, what your ambitions are, right? So if you want to become management material, soft skills for sure. I think soft skills apply to anyone at any level, but moving on to higher levels, you need to know how to manage people. And that means, how do you communicate? How do you have difficult conversations? How do you do performance assessment? How do you do briefing notes? How do you brief up? How do you brief down and sideways? How do you build relationships? How do you negotiate? These are all soft skills that perhaps we didn't focus on. We're coming out our career. So if you want to become the higher levels, I definitely focus on the soft skills. Along with that, if you're middle managers or lower, the number one thing I'd recommend is data analytics. And data analytics is not even AI yet, right? But you want to be part of the people that are bringing the AI ideas to the office. So if you're just using Excel right now, that was great 20 years ago or 15. I don't know when it came out, but you know what? I get what the point I'm saying here is, the same way everyone uses Excel nowadays, data analytics is where we're going. So take those classes, and ACFO is providing data analytics courses. We provide them as part of the Controllership Training Center. We have an intense course and we have a one-day course. So if you want data analytics, take our courses. We got people for intro and advanced, and some of them is free through the Joint Career Development Program. You can have access to a 3-day program for free. So you want to make sure that data analytics is where you're focusing on, because if you're still doing advanced Excel, you're wasting your time. I'm not saying it won't be useful for the next couple of years, but 5-10 years from now, data analytics is where it is. Think of, so, I was speaking with the president that represents the translators and the interpreters over at CAPE. If you look at translators, look at Google Translate, right? You can translate 10 words or 10 million words in 1 second by pressing that button. It's not perfect. Of course it's not perfect. But you see how quickly it's improved in the past couple of years. 5 or 10 years from now, if I'm a translator, I'd be concerned for my job, because you won't be doing the translation. You'll probably be reviewing it, right? That's where you want to do. You want to work on what are the nuances? How can you add value? And I see the same things. And if I had to guess, the people that are more at risk for automation is our members that are at their lower level. People that might be involved with data entry, reconciliation, audits at the very basic level. So those are the people you need to up your skills to get to the next level. Now, don't get me wrong, we'll be there to protect your jobs, but your jobs might be different. I never protect the task. I protect your job and your skill set, because if your skill sets are always improving, the rate at which you innovate and learn new skills, that's what you want to do. And if you're not sure what you should be working on, have a conversation with your manager. Like, where do you see yourself 5-10 years from now? And start working on those skill sets, not just the skill sets you need for your current job, but for your future jobs.
And sorry, Danny, if I could just add one thing, is that when we talk about the roundtable that we were conceived of earlier in the year, that's sort of the purpose of this research, right? Is that we don't always know exactly what is needed, and what we're trying to find. That's what we're trying to find out with the research, is get all these experts in the same room, get members in the room to talk about their tasks, and to sort of get a sense of what's coming. And then when we know what might be coming, then we can know what skills to work on.
That's a great point, Maddie. Thanks for that. And that's why that survey we're going to send out, I think it's this week. Please fill out that survey. The best way to know what has potential to be automated is to actually just write down what are all the tasks. I know there was someone at TBS that was working on automation, and when someone comes knocking at your door and says, we think this is going to get automated, they don't know your duties as well as you do. So you shouldn't be against it, but you need to have a plan and say, I've already outlined the tasks that I believe can be automated, and here's where I want to add value. When you come prepared, positive attitude, problem solver, you are acknowledging the change, embracing it. That's the kind of people management want to promote. If someone's putting their head in the sand and says, no, I'm not going to help you, you can't do this, it's not worth it, they're going to be left on the side. And then you're going to be fending and calling and saying, hey, what can we do to make sure I keep my tasks? Don't latch onto your tasks. They'll be ever changing, continuously changing. So make sure you're always increasing your skill set. Next question. You said ACFO does lobbying. Do you support one party over another? We don't actually. No, when we lobby, we lobby based on issues. ACFO is a firm believer that we will work with any party as long as it helps our members. So look at an example like Phoenix. The Conservatives started Phoenix, and then the Liberals came in, they implemented it, and they both have pie on their face, and we don't care what their political position is. We just want it to get resolved. So we'll work with any party on any issue as long as it helps our members. Now, we're not registered as lobbyists because we're not spending 50% of our time on the parliament here, but we are establishing relationships to see how we can help them. And this is why it's so important to be to know the politicians, know the MPs, be involved, because we want to help them. We look at their political platforms and we say, what can we help them that actually helps our members? Because if we say, hey, you want to put this forward for whistleblower protection, a Conservative will say, hey, you know what? Whistleblower is important for us. Absolutely. What do you have for me? Well, we've already laid out the policy. Our members actually work in this field. So when we help them, they help us push our agenda forward that helps our members. So we don't affiliate with any political party. We only based on issues.
Yeah, and if I could just add something for that, Danny, to give you a sense of like in a practical way what we actually do. When we say we lobby or we advocate, a lot of times that's doing this research and preparing these either one-pagers that we give out, or we'll write letters to various MPs. You know, we're often asked to appear before various committees, and we provide submissions. We provide, you know, pre-budget submissions every year. So it's by lobbying, it's a lot of this kind of practical work of, okay, here is our position, and, you know, we submit it to all the parties, like Danny was saying. So just to give you a sense of what, when I say lobby, like what I specifically mean, like Danny said, we're not registered lobbyists. It's not like 50% of our work. What I mean is just the sort of a lot of the written communications that we produce and appearing before committees.
Yeah, it's a great point, Maddie. You know, Maddie's been on a budget lockdown, so we can see what the budget is like. We do budget submissions. This is all on the back end of stuff that members don't realize we're implicated in, right? We do look at the budget numbers, because we want to make sure, what is the government working on? Are we putting money in for training of our staff? Are they going to fix Phoenix? These are all the things that come from the very top. If you look at the course offered by Kevin Page and his team at the Institute of Fiscal Studies and Democracy, they will emphasize the importance of understanding the politics of things, because that's how decisions are made. So for us to really put our agenda forward, we need to look at these details at a high level, but our members might not be aware of that, because it doesn't impact their day-to-day. But it might trickle down eventually and impact them. So when ACFO does our SWOT analysis, we're looking, you know, strength, weaknesses, and opportunities, and we want to make sure what's coming down the pipelines here, because we got to protect our members. So as much as we want to protect our jobs, we want to protect the Canadian taxpayer to ensure that we're adding value. You never have to worry about your job as long as you're adding value, but how you add value might change over time. So that's why we want to make sure that we're working with different parties and also our affiliates, like Maddie mentioned, the Canadian Labour Congress, so that we are connected and know what's happening, so that when we need to sway things one way or another, we do have those leverage points. Maybe these last two questions here to finish it off. How will interviewing change with COVID? Will ACFO determine guidelines? The process would be the same, right? If you're doing an interview, you might be in front of a committee. I would review who the committee members are, right? I've seen committees where it was a former manager. When you have a conflict of interest, you've got to disclose that. You need to remove yourself from a situation. Do we want to revamp the whole staffing policy? Yes, and that includes interviews, even tests. Look, if you have to do a test and they've given you 24 hours to prepare, certain managers will give you the day off to prepare for your test, while others will say, no, I'm not giving you time off. Well, that's an unfair advantage to someone if you have 24 hours unpaid time and others don't. Some tests are performed via computer, some others are written by hand. They're not the same tests. So we need to find out where there's a middle here where it's fair, but also it's efficient. And that's where the problem is right now it's not fair and it's not efficient. It takes 6 months and not everyone gets tested the same way. And the last question here for the sibling question, does your response change if the director retired? No, I'll tell you what, even if the person retired, if there was nepotism, it might be harder to prove now, but it's a department culture, right? If we can show, I mean, I don't know, I mean, this member should probably contact us here so we can pull out the details, but if we know for a fact that this person did hire a sibling and they got promoted and they're retired, well, someone is still accountable, right? It's like if I commit a fraud and I retire, does that mean I'm off the hook? No. I mean, they're not going to lose their job, obviously, or their pension, but the department is still responsible, because I would ask, what's the departmental policies on hiring practices? Don't you ask your people to disclose if there's a appearance of nepotism and conflict of interest here? So we could still dig deeper, but I think for this case, the person's probably best to contact us so we can really look at it, or maybe give you some advice on how we can proceed. We've got no more questions. Maddie, I'd like to thank you very much for sharing the information with us today. And I'm really happy, friends, we get to show you through these webinars our fantastic staff that we have at ACFO that work on different things, but ultimate goal is all for our members. So I'm happy we got to get Maddie some FaceTime and a lot of things she's working on. So thanks to Maddie, thanks to Joe who's in the background. We will see you next week, friends. We're talking about the National Joint Council. And if you don't know who they are, you should tune in, because they're responsible for many things, one of which is your healthcare and dental plan. So tune in next week, friends. We'll talk about that with the General Secretary of the NUG. Till then, stay safe. Bye-bye.